It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Happy Confused Wednesday. Often this is Competition Wednesday, but that was kind of yesterday because the game is Saturday. We got Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt speaking today. I'm all turned upside down because Anthony's not here, but the very capable Metal Chris is in. But Chris, you don't like to be on YouTube, so I'm just keep you get to be your big disembodied voice over there.
Yeah, that's kind of how I like it.
Yeah, so Chris, just that big voice you hear, and for the radio audience, it's the same. You never see any of us. If you saw me, I got a fresh haircut, so that's nice. But the YouTube audience, Chris just might be a voice at times today. Just a big old a figment of your imagination, except for he's real. But you can't see him. So also someone you won't be able to see, Sam Fortier, but he is going to call us at 5 o'clock. Excited to talk to Sam. But we're going to start the show today with some of what Cliff had to say at his press conference as he and Jaden Daniels prepare for the Detroit Lions on Sunday. And I thought this was a very interesting quote from the Commanders' offensive coordinator about a topic that is, I think, hotly debated within NFL circles, the value of the run game and what actually should be happening over the course of a game to manage a game, the value of it. And there's a lot of folks in the analytics kind of world that are just like pass the ball pretty much all the time. Like running the ball is a bit of a waste of a down. And if you look at things like EPA per play, like it's correct. If you have an estimated points added, which is what EPA stands for, and you look at run plays versus pass plays, every time you pass the ball, the EPA is higher. Every time we pass the ball, we estimated add more points to the scoreboard versus the value of running the football. But we talked about this quite a bit last year with Eric Bieniemy, where there is actually a breaking point where that doesn't become true. You can't just say passing is more valuable than running, so don't do any running at all. Because there is a point where your total EPA is going to be maximal, where the run is used enough to make sure that the pass number stays high. Because if you never run the football, then teams can sit on your pass stuff and your pass value number comes down. Your goal isn't to have the highest possible pass or the lowest or the highest possible run. It's to have the highest possible combination of the two, and then balance that out over the number of each that you call, and making teams respect running the football, not to mention what it does for your defense and keeping teams, for instance, like the Tampa Bay Bucks, off the field. There's value in that. Your estimated points added doesn't necessarily account for, oh, hey, this 0-yard run was added or actually took away points on the board because you're now in a 2nd and 10, but at least it took 40 seconds off the clock, and that's 40 seconds that Baker Mayfield doesn't have to work with, or Jared Goff and company don't have to work with this weekend. So Kingsbury was asked today about staying committed to the run game, despite the fact that on Sunday it wasn't very good.
Yeah, it's helped me having a defensive head coach, I can tell you that much, because he lets it be known we need to run the football at times that I would maybe in my previous life be airing it out. But we're going to do whatever it takes to win, and we have good backs, and we've had a great scheme throughout the year. We've faced some good fronts. I mean, those two guys inside there are as good as anybody we played against all year at Tampa, and the linebackers are tremendous players. So it was a challenge. Todd Bowles is one of the best defensive minds in the league and has been for a long time. So overall it was a challenge, and we just kept plugging away at it, and Jaden made some plays with his feet that helped us out. But I really, having DQ and just him mentoring me in a way, if you will, just about sticking to the run game, how it affects the defense, seeing it from that perspective has been good for me.
And I think that is 100% valid. I think there are defensive coaches who obviously way overdo it. And I think the previous iterations of NFL offenses probably way overdo this. But there's just an undeniable truth to what they're saying. I mean, look at the best teams in the league the last bunch of years. The Niners have been the best team in the NFC the past, 5-6 years? Dominant running team. The team that has flirted with upsetting them at times, the Philadelphia Eagles, have been a good running team even before they got Saquon Barkley. The Detroit Lions, they run the mess out of the football. And if you can do that and you control the game, it opens up bigger potential for chunk plays, let's say like 10 to 15 yards in that intermediate area because linebackers are cheating up to try to stop the run, and there's a schematic element to it. But also your big explosive plays down the field because you get in these, hey, we ran the football effectively on first down. Okay, now it's 2nd and 4. Well, on 2nd and 4, I have my entire playbook open. On 2nd and 10, I'm just trying to get 5 yards so I can get to 3rd and 5 and keep it manageable. I'm not going to take a huge, big, low propensity, low success rate shot down the field on 2nd and 10 likely because, one, that is a huge risk of losing yardage, and because it's a long developing play by nature. Like, unless it's a fade ball and you're not going to get the coverages on a 2nd and long that invite those. You're going to get those on like 3rd and short, man-to-man. We got to make sure we have resources everywhere. Whatever. Like, okay, now we get our fade ball to the outside where it's a 3-step drop and a deep throw. But most of the time, you're not going to get those kind of coverages. You're going to get your zone mixes and things like that on a 2nd and 10 that it really is just kind of dedicated to keeping everything underneath and making sure that you don't pick up a chunk play and steal the first down out of a bad down and distance. So you have the schematic element and the risk element of, okay, now we have to drop back against a pass rush that might now make us 3rd and 18, and that's terrible. And if it's incomplete, then I'm in 3rd and 10, and that's terrible for me. So I'm just going to try to, quick game, something underneath, and can I get it to 3rd and manageable? Versus it's 2nd and 4, okay, yeah, if I take a sack, like that's going to suck. But if I get, if it's an incomplete pass down the field, okay, 3rd and 4, we can live with that. So I think that element of it kind of helps explain it. And if you look at the stats from over the weekend, look, man, Commanders' rush game, I don't think I have to tell anybody, was real bad this weekend. Rush or expected EPA per rush. The Commanders running back, Brian Robinson, who had the most carries in the game, had a minus 4.7 total EPA. So on Brian Robinson's carries, allegedly, the Commanders, according to the EPA formula, lost nearly 5 points. So if you're an offensive coordinator, it'd be really easy to get away from that. Jeremy McNichols had just 1 carry. His was a minus 0.3. Let's see. Where is Eckler's in here somewhere? Austin Eckler. Jaden, his rushing attempts were minus EPA, which is actually pretty rare for him because often he scrambles and picks up first downs, which are huge point adders. But Eckler, it's because I need to go to the next page. Eckler, I think, actually had a decent day. His EPA in total was plus 1.1. So his EPA per rush, he had 8 attempts, whatever. It's like 0.3 points. Compared to, if we go to the passing stats from the weekend and say, hey, every time Jaden Daniels dropped back, how much was that worth? His EPA per drop back was 0.25 every drop back. So you're scoring every time Jaden Daniels drops back 0.25 points. And so for Dan Quinn to be like, look, I know that is part of the equation here, but I need you to keep running it. I need you to find ways because we need this clock to run, is not only how they won the Tampa game, where all of a sudden they don't punt. They have 35 minutes time of possession. They dominate in other areas that don't necessarily just correlate with one stat. It's why stats require context. It's why analytics on their own isn't just a big spreadsheet of information. It's the interpretation of the data. You have all these other things that not only won them the game against Tampa, but are necessary to win against Detroit. Because if you get in a shootout against Detroit, I don't think you're going to win. I think Detroit has more weapons, more options, and the Commanders' defense has given up more stuff. Even everyone loves to talk about how injured Detroit is, but have they actually played bad? No, they haven't. So watching this weekend and watching how Cliff and Dan together manage this game, I think is really, really interesting as not just a subplot, perhaps the plot of the game. Because for as much as we talk about, and by we, I mean specifically, I on this show and Logan and I on Take Command, we talk about these game scripts. We talk about game flow. This is how you manage it. Saying like, hey, we want to possess the ball. Okay, that's really easy, but how do you go about it? It's finding things that can both move you forward because, okay, you ran the ball 3 times nowhere. That's 3 and out. You didn't actually, sure, it's better than 3 incomplete passes and going 3 and out. You wasted, a minute 40 off the clock versus, 18 seconds. Cool. That's better. But how do you find things that both keep the clock moving and move you forward? And whether it's the screen game, whether it's the right runs at the right times, whether it is quarterback run game, whether it's the RPO game, Cliff did a masterful job of that against Tampa, and it set them up to obviously go down and win that game late with Jaden and company leading that final drive to set up the doink, to set up the win and this matchup against Detroit this weekend. Hear more from Kingsbury next, and then still to come on the show today, I do believe Linnell is going to pop back in for some football therapy at 5:30. We'll sit him down on the proverbial couch because we don't have an actual couch, and see what's on the young man's mind, see if we can, after he's all riled up from arguing with the Roosters, see if we can get him back down to earth before he just does it again on Throwdown Thursday tomorrow. We also have a great chat with Vince Wilfork coming up in just a little bit. The 2-time Super Bowl champion and I got to chat yesterday morning. We talked mostly about football, but we talked a little food as well. And then actually recorded a crossover edition of Take Command earlier today with one of our colleagues up in Detroit. So we're going to play a little bit of that for you a little bit later on in the show as well. But more from Kingsbury on the late game situational dominance of the Commanders next on The Hoffman Show. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up in just a little bit, a discussion with Zach Clark, who is the host of the Detroit Football Network podcast, which is the Take Command of Detroit, if you will, on this matchup this weekend. Looking forward to sharing that with you. Vince Wilfork, 6:30 tonight. You will hear that conversation with the big fella, so very much looking forward to that. We are locked and loaded. Sam Fortier live at 5 as well here for Not My Beat. Right now, let's continue on hearing a little bit more from Cliff Kingsbury. You'll hear much more from Cliff in our Pick 6 at 6, and of course, you'll hear from Jowett Jr. as well. But Cliff was asked a lot about the late game situations and how they have continued to be so unprecedentedly good in these situations. Obviously, they've won, 5 straight games on the final play from scrimmage, which is just a preposterous streak. And someone asked me earlier today, can they keep it going? I was like, yeah, they can. It'd be nice if they didn't have to. It'd be nice if they could seal it up a little bit sooner. But by the same token, like, they're not scared of these situations. And that's something that, even though he's the one calling those plays down the stretch, he credits, Cliff Kingsbury does, Dan Quinn, for that preparedness.
Dan's done a tremendous job of just, we talk about on offense being situational masters and repping those things and those type 4-minute drills or 2-minute drills or, centering right, centering left. So we get them a bunch multiple times each week. And when they show up, the guys they've been through it. There's a calm because they've been through it and they've just executed at a high level when that number's been called.
And we've heard this now from a number of people, but nobody practices more situational football than the Commanders. There might be other teams that do as much, but there's no team that most of us have ever seen. When I say most of us, I mean those of us who cover football for a living. Guys like John Keim, who've been doing this for 30 years. Guys like Charles Davis from CBS, talked to him about this as he's called a couple of games this year, and on down the list of analysts that have interacted with this staff. They can't remember ever a team handling situational football quite like this. And it's not just the amount of time they spend on it on the practice field of, okay, let's put 4 minutes on the clock, or I don't know, let me pick a random number. 4 minutes, 41 seconds on the clock. We need to go and kill as much time as possible and then kick a game-winning field goal. It's exactly the situation they had on Sunday. And I doubt they practiced with 4:41 on the clock, but I guarantee you they've done some version of that. A offensive version of the 4-minute drill where you're tied, right? 4-minute offense is typically you have a lead and you got to kill the clock. 4-minute is kind of the same thing when you're tied, though. You want to kill the clock with enough time to kick the game winner in the end. You want to manage the clock so that you do not give the other team a chance. And they did that picture perfectly, and it's because they've done it dozens and dozens and dozens of times, not just during the season, but going back to the summer and training camp where we did get to see that, in the spring where we got to witness that as well. But, I mean, they did this in, like, walkthroughs before we were even out there in the spring. Like, phase 1 of OTAs against the coaches. They're not even allowed to practice, like, offense on defense. I don't even know what they're doing at that point because we don't get to see that as a media. I was like, oh, they're out there with the strength coaches. I guess they're somehow doing situational work. Like, it was crazy. Like, the first things they talked about. They also do it in meetings. Like, they have an extra situational meeting that they do specifically to let Dave Gardy, who they hired this offseason, and to be their situational guru and their rules guru, say, hey, these are things that came up. These are some things that you should be thinking about as we get down the stretch, XYZ. Like, they are all over it, and that goes from DQ saying, I'm going to be a master of situational football. As for how Cliff manages it from, like, an emotional standpoint, well, he can't really rely on anybody else for that. Here's how he's felt recently during these late-game heroics performed by Jaden Daniels.
Getting a tighter fade to hide the gray hairs, I can tell you that much. I do not love it. But it's been a fun group. They're resilient as hell. They keep fighting no matter what. And, on the sideline, you always feel like you have a chance, and that's been fun to be a part of.
I can't imagine what it's like to know, like, hey, we've got a chance, but I got to make sure that I get the right play call in, that I don't mess this up. And they have done a masterful job of doing just that. Cliff has not messed it up. He's given chances. And I think the other thing, too, is like there's kind of a calmness is one word for it. A confidence is another word for it. But I can't think of what like the one word synonym would be for lack of panic. But there are times in some of these drives where I'm like, y'all got to go. Like, y'all need to hurry up a little bit. Now's not the time to run the football. Now's not the time to run the screen. Now's not the time to do X, Y, Z. And they always wind up winning in the end. And I'm like, well, screw me. Like, what do I know? Clearly nothing. From a tempo standpoint, there are times I'm like, I think y'all can go a little bit faster. But they are so on it that there is no panic. There is no, we got to get to the line when they don't actually have to get to the line. There's a minute 23 to go. You got 60 yards to drive. And it's like, can y'all pick up the pace? And it's like, absolutely not. We're fine. We don't need to call the timeout right now. Dan Quinn on it as soon as he needs to be, but they have consistently just been able to hit all the right buttons. And sure, you have to occasionally then get lucky and you have to have a big one. The Dallas one doesn't happen the way it does. Even if Marcus Mariota converts the 4th and 1 and gets 5 yards, it's different because he got 30. So you have to make a play at some point, but they seemingly always have found the play. And I think that is really, really special. Now, of course, it helps when you have a really, really special guy who is triggering all of it at the quarterback position. And Cliff was also asked today if there's anything he's learned. I feel like he's asked this question every week. But anything new when Jaden does something else that we've never seen happen before, a rookie leading that kind of drive? What has he learned about Jaden as this season has progressed?
I mean, every week I think something new comes up that's specific to the game, but the poise, the work ethic throughout the week, the mentality doesn't waver. I mean, he showed up same time this week every morning early and put in the same work he did the week before and the previous 16 weeks. So I think there's specific instances that continue to help him grow and evolve as a player, but he's very consistent in his approach and has been since he got here.
There's something that Mitch Tischler told us yesterday when he joined us for Not My Beat that I thought was really spectacular and speaks to an approach that Quinn has implemented, that Jaden has lived, that Cliff and Joe Witt, I think, also have done a great job of holding to and their units on down, which is this. You would think that there would be a this is house money approach for Washington at this point. And frankly, as an analyst, like from the outside, I have a bit of that. I'm like, whatever happens at this point happens. This is what it is. They could win a Super Bowl or play in the Super Bowl. And I'm like, if they lose, like, hell of a season. Hang any banner you want. This is fantastic. They're not thinking like that. And not only are they not just thinking like, whatever, if we lose, which, like, you shouldn't as a competitor. If I was in the locker room, it'd be different. I would not have that mentality. I'd be like, why? We've asked why not us all year. Why would that change now? But it's instead of looking at Detroit and being like, they're the big bag bullies on the block, they're the number 1 seed. It's they have to go through us. And that's the sign this week. That's the thing that Mitch relayed from being there in the locker room, which is why I love having him on Tuesdays. Very simply, instead of thinking we have to go to and through Detroit, it's anybody, anytime, anywhere. And this happens to be 8:15, the Detroit Lions at Ford Field Saturday night, but they have to go through us, even though we're coming to them. And I think that mentality is really cool. And I think that consistency of every week, no matter where, no matter who, no matter when, they got to go through us. And the sameness of the approach has been a very healthy thing for this team all season long. When we get back, let's get to know the Detroit side of it a little bit better. Had a great conversation this morning with Zach Clark, who hosts our Odyssey Sports podcast up in Detroit. So a little crossover edition of Take Command that we're going to share most of with you next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. And earlier today, I had the great pleasure of chatting with Zach Clark, who is the host of our Detroit podcast, Detroit Lions podcast, up at our sister stations at Odyssey in Detroit. And so without further ado, let's get to know the opponent a little bit better and how they're approaching this game. And then we'll chat even more about what went down in Ashburn today with Sam Fortier at 5 o'clock.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It is the Take Command podcast. It is also the Detroit Football Network podcast. I'm Craig Hoffman, the host of Take Command, our Odyssey Sports podcast on the Commanders, and it's my pleasure to be here with Zach Clark, with the co-host, of course, of the Detroit Football Network podcast. Half the audience, Zach, already knew one half of that. Half the audience knew the other half, but time to talk a little playoff football between Washington and Detroit. Who would have thought, Zach? Who would have thought?
I'll tell you what, the Commanders have had one of the most exciting seasons that I can remember, and certainly the Lions season has been exciting, but and I can't believe I'm going to say this, it's gone almost as expected. There's been some hiccups, but we expected the Lions to be a really good football team this year, and they have been. The Commanders have been just thrilling in the way that they've won football games, as a Detroiter and an NFC North member. Watching them humiliate the Bears was one of the greatest things I've ever seen. I'd love to see it over and over and over again. So I'm excited for an opportunity to see them up close and personal. I've watched, but now I'm going to experience. I'm looking forward to it.
I chuckled pretty hard the other day. I was listening to the Athletic Football Show, and my guy Robert Mays, who's obviously a Bears fan for those that don't know, and he's just like, man, every time the Commanders play, I'm having fun, I'm watching them, and then they have to show the flashback to the Hail Mary, and I'm like, how did I get roped into this? And, also, Zach, you probably don't know this, but I had quite the back and forth with Bears fans that week. They were obnoxious and terrible all week long, and so the amount of pettiness I had after that game was unseen in the history of this show otherwise. So
how satisfying was that for you, though? I had to feel so good.
Amazing.
The way and especially with I can't think of the guy's name, but he was taunting the crowd. He's in the wrong spot.
Oh, yeah.
Lose. I mean, it's just, yes.
It's amazing. It was amazing. It was so good. I was in the building. It was amazing. Fantastic. Before we get to this game, just real quick, I think I'd be remiss to not ask you about kind of how Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes and everybody in Detroit has built this, because I think Detroit is the model in many ways for Washington in terms of how they're going about this. Now, there are some key differences. Obviously, in Detroit, you guys with the veteran quarterback route, you trade Stafford, get Goff. That works out tremendously. This roster is outstanding. For Washington, they're in year one of what we hope to be an eventual outstanding roster, but a lot of this is quarterback powered because they had the rookie kind of more traditional way to build it from in-house. But in terms of implementing a play style, a culture, a way of going about your business, at what point during the Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes build did you guys kind of go, oh, like a lot of coaches say this stuff, they're about it and it's working? Because obviously it didn't start great, that 3-13 first season, but I think, and then Hard Knocks happens and everyone's all excited. That season starts bad but ends amazing, and they've basically been the best team in football for 2.5 years at this point. So like, what are some of the things that you remember early on in that build latching on to, being like, they may be onto something here?
I think one of the first things is that Dan Campbell embraced the environment of the city and the team and its communal feel immediately. He bought in, he realized, and he'd played here before. I think that was something that people don't forget but need to realize. In fact, he was on the 0-16 team. So he knows what this is like. He knows what the depths of despair have been. I do think Hard Knocks was the biggest light bulb moment, even for us in Detroit, because even here, we don't get that kind of access that Hard Knocks gets, right? And so I think that was a big one. And also that felt nice for us. And this is going to sound odd, but, we're in Detroit. Other people were like, oh, that looks nice. I'm like, yes, it is nice. Look at this. I think the most important thing, though, Craig, is, especially with the last regime, we were always trying to be somebody else. We should do what the Patriots do. We should do what somebody else does. Brad and Dan have done what they do. It's their own model that they've created for themselves. I'm not trying to shoehorn something else in. And I think a lot of that credit goes to Sheila Ford Hamp. I don't know what made Mrs. Ford hand it over, but Sheila made some really astute personnel choices, starting with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, and it just has paid off. And the other thing with the Lions, I mean, we can go down a laundry list of draft picks that have not worked out very well, but not in the last 3 years. They've almost all worked out spectacularly, and some of them even better than you could think of. And so I just think from the foundation up, watching a consistent build, living in your own environment, being who you are and embracing it the whole time and not wavering. I mean, I know most football coaches say, well, we don't listen to that, or the media says this. The Lions have taken a lot of criticism for some of the things they've done, not in a super crazy way, but a lot of the aggressiveness, right? Some of the things Dan Campbell said early on gave people the impression that he wasn't very smart. And I think that's a miscalculation on a lot of people's part that has gone away. I can't think of a time when the Lions had coaches in demand. No coach in the Lions history, head coach, has ever coached ever again. Think about that.
Wow.
No Lions head coach has ever been a head coach ever again.
Wow.
The head
That's
coach.
insane.
And now they're coming after our assistants, which is annoying, but it's also like we've arrived.
Right. Those are champagne problems. The other thing that you talk about, Dan Campbell's intelligence, I think the thing that comes across in Hard Knocks is there's an emotional intelligence there, the way he connects with people. And that's something that DQ has. And, as we're going through the process of hiring a coach last year, I'm fortunate enough that the co-host of, I apparently on this show, I only talk with very bearded men because Logan Paulson played for Dan in Atlanta. And he's like, Dan is just different. Like the way he's my favorite head coach I ever played for. And like Logan played for Kyle and loves Kyle Shanahan, thinks he's a genius, and who wouldn't? And those two had a great relationship, and as far as I know, still have a good one. But like the way Logan talked about Dan and the way he operated the program, I was like, I'm kind of intrigued by this as someone who looks into the psychological stuff quite a bit, and I think that has been a really cool thing. And I think there's something that's mirrored there too between the two Dans is there's both an emotional intelligence and connection and brotherhood with also a toughness, because sometimes those two things get kind of conflated on opposite sides of like, you can't be emotionally in touch and like tough and masculine. It's like, no. That's actually the most tough way you can be, is that you are vulnerable and you are connected to the people next to you. And it's the best of sports. It's what it's all about. And I think there are arguably no two franchises that do that better than what Detroit has been doing the last 3 years, and then what Washington did this year in a pretty remarkable way. And that then allows you to play better on the field and implement the play style and all those things. And I don't want to go too much high level here. I want to get into the game. So I'll just wrap with this. My favorite quote, perhaps of any coach I've heard in the last 5 years, is from Campbell earlier this season, where in one of the post-game locker rooms, he goes, "It doesn't matter who puts on our uniform. Like, we are who we are," is basically the crux of it. And that's not how the NFL is supposed to work. It's supposed to be a talent league. But the fact that they have been able to, no matter who has come through that building with all the injuries that they've had on defense, be the same team and implement that play style, play with the same physicality, not change their calls. They just get guys up to speed and say, "You're a Lion, here's the jersey, this is how we do," and then they go get down. I think that is remarkable and is a huge reason why they're the number one seed and favored by double digits on divisional weekend against a very good Washington team.
Yeah, and just to put a bow on that, we were talking to the great Doc Walker last night, and he called Dan and Dan cousins. And I just love it. I love that because I do feel that way. Everything that you said is true. And I just think, and this is not a patronizing pat you on the head thing, but we're just you in the future. I really believe
that. No, I totally agree with that. 100%. So, all right, let's get into the game. Let's get into the X's and O's of it all. As you guys get to your game preview this week, we're recording this on Wednesday morning. Logan and I will do our big, giant X's and O's. Logan's watched way too much tape film review on Thursday. But I certainly have some big topics, things that I think are going to be important. What's the number one thing for you, though, that you think determines the outcome of this game on Saturday night?
I think the easy thing is to say the defense, because that's what struggled so much. But the Lions and their run game and how David Montgomery folds back in and how the Commanders deal with that is going to be wildly interesting because, and I think that's true for Lions fans too, because all season long, it's been a 50-50 split. Gibbs, Montgomery, Gibbs, Montgomery. Their carries are almost identical until a couple of weeks ago. Jahmyr Gibbs on his own has been fantastic. NFC Player of the Week, NFC Player of the Month to end the season. It's been spectacular. how does that work with Montgomery coming back? I don't worry about an ego thing. I just worry about a game plan thing. They had a system. The system gets upset. Things don't change.
It's time to take command with former.
Only on our side of it that end with Detroit winning by a lot because their offense is one thing, which is what is the game script? What is it that actually, like, how does this game play out? Because there's ways, and a lot of them. If you think of it like the NBA draft lottery, there's 1,000 combinations, and there's a lot of ping pong ball combinations, unfortunately, on our side of it that end with Detroit winning by a lot because their offense is so potent. The good news for Washington, though, is the game script they just played against Tampa is how they win this game. Can they control the ball? And I think against Detroit, in some ways, it's easier because Tampa's run defense is very, very good. Running inside on them is almost impossible with the combination of speed and quickness of Kalijah Kancey, power of Vita Vea. And Detroit, thanks to a lot of injuries, as tough and as physical as they play, you can run on them a little bit. Problem is a lot of teams don't get the opportunity to because their offense is so good that they're up by 1,000,000 points by the second quarter, and then they're goodbye to your running game. So to me, but what you just said of can Detroit control the ball, shorten the game, then Washington's kind of looking to do the same thing. I really do wonder about kind of this game script because I think a lot of people expect 40 to 30 type of game, and I just don't know if there's going to be enough possessions to actually have a 40 to 30 type game.
And I see why people would think that. The Lions are at their best when they win the toss and eat up like an 8-minute drive on the ground. It puts the opposition on their heels, especially when you're at home. And then at that point, if you can't be successful immediately, the crowd goes nuts and you're only down 7-0, but you're in it deep. And so I do think that ball control is where this game is won and lost. And you're right. The over-under in that Minnesota game, I was there at week 18. It was like 50 something. And it didn't get past 40 barely. And I think that's going to be a big part of it. Could this be a shootout? Absolutely. You were talking about ping pong balls. I think a good chunk of those ping pong balls landed a shootout, maybe in the second half. But I do think if both teams, whoever controls, and this is, I know, is light work, whoever controls the ball is going to have success. But in this situation, I think it means even more. And my second thing on that, I'm just so excited and curious to see how Jaden Daniels commands this Commanders offense and what that looks like in a playoff situation where he's on the road again. That's the thing. People say, well, young kid, can't trust rookie quarterback. Sure. Are you sure? Because, I mean, he looked pretty good last week, and now brimming with confidence.
He's not young, though, for a rookie. That's the thing. Like, he's 24 years old. Like, he's very experienced. He played way more games in college than most guys did. And, like, I don't think there's a lot of stuff that transfers, in terms of difficulty level from college to the NFL. But when it comes to communicating and it comes to all these things, like Saturday night in Tuscaloosa or Saturday night in the swamp down in Gainesville, like, that's y'all's crowd is maybe the best in the NFL. Like, Detroit's insane. But I don't know how much more, like, it's a 10 compared to the 10 of Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. Like, he's been in that atmosphere before.
And I think that is one of the things that makes him so dangerous is he's got this calmness about him, even in these high-pressure situations. But as soon as the ball is snapped, the calm kind of translates into this, like, electricity. And I'll tell you what, I wish the Lions defense was healthier for 1,000 reasons. But I would love to see him against a full strength Lions defense because I think it would still be impressive. And I'll be very curious to see how the Lions work in their secondary because it's had to have been, it was their weakness early on last season, certainly. And this year it was not their strength because of how good the front was. But then, 3, 4, 5 weeks in, the front dissolves. And, Joseph and Branch have been great. Amik Robertson's played a lot better. So be curious to see how that works out.
Yeah, the Amik Robertson thing, I mean, what he did to JJ in week 18 was pretty wild.
I do think some of that, though, I'll be careful.
Well, they've known each other since high school.
And there's a chip there, right? Because they're both from Louisiana. One went to LSU, one went to La Tech. They're not the same, right? And so I think there was a personal element to it. But you said something a lot earlier. Everything's personal for these guys. I think that's true across the board in the NFL, but that emotional buy-in that they have with each other, everything is a slight. Everything is disrespectful. And they look what they did to the Cowboys. How many times did offensive linemen throw a pass in that game? 3 times?
Yeah.
This is what happened the year before that. They remembered.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting because I mean, talk about personal slights, like what Amon-Ra St. Brown has said about De'Ami Brown, and I get it from Amon-Ra's perspective, and he's been the far better player, but De'Ami all of a sudden, like he's having the best year of his career. Arguably, he just had the best game of his career. So there's a lot of, Terry McLaurin is always feeling slighted when he gets out on the field. He's like, watch me, I'm a 3rd round pick, and people don't think I'm that good because my quarterbacks have been a circus, carousel of nothingness until this year. Now look at me go. So I think there's a lot of that. And because of the way the Lions play schematically, they play a ton of man-to-man. Like there's opportunities for those guys to make plays. When teams get the Lions defensively, like the offenses that have had good games against Detroit, even though often Detroit's offense has been able to just raise the bar to a level that they can't get to. What are some of the ways they got? Is it miscommunication in some of that man coverage? Is it big gashes in the run game? Like what is Washington going to be trying to take advantage of for Detroit?
I do think there is, and we'll see how he responds. Terrion Arnold is a lot of fun. He's going to be a very good player, but he gets got quite a bit. And some of that is he'll get burned, or instead of getting burned, he'll commit a penalty. And so he gets picked on quite a bit. But to me, the most frustrating thing has been, and last year it was much worse, the Lions at times when they're off their game struggle on 3rd and medium ish in situations where you should be able to put people away. The drives are allowed to prolong themselves. It doesn't happen a ton, but when you asked when they get got, it is things like that. And there's been a lot of miscommunication. At least there was for a period when Alex Anzalone was out. But now that he's back quarterbacking the defense again, if you look at week 18, the coverage was better. And I think that's because he was out there sending signals. And that's no disrespect to what they've been doing when he was out, but his presence, Jack Campbell's been fantastic. He was wearing the green dot, but Alex Anzalone back last week showed up more than just in what he did. It's what others are able to do around him. He frees up Branch a little bit. So I think, that's something that's been buttoned up, but still the Lions are vulnerable defensively. It's just, it's their weakness, and it was not their strength going in. But certainly now, I mean, goodness.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting elements of that from a communication standpoint is the Washington no huddle. It's not necessarily hurry up, but what it does is it puts pressure on defenses to communicate without a huddle. You have to be able to get lined up quickly because even though they're subbing in and out and like you get your chance to match the substitutions and there's time, if they're on the ball, you have to be ready and you have to communicate. And Cliff does a really good job as an offensive coordinator of putting defenders in conflict. And whether that's with the RPO game or whether that is in the zone read game or whether that's with the route combinations and some kind of twists on some I would say more standard NFL route concepts of we're just going to put a guy that it looks like Spot that you've seen 1,000 times in these West Coast offenses, but we put a little twist on it that guy, that linebacker, that DB, like he doesn't know what to do. And to get that stuff communicated and to be ready for it is a lot harder when you can't come together between every snap, and the crowd's going to be loud as hell. And that, Detroit's defense is used to dealing with that of like, hey, we're loud, or our crowd is loud and behind us, but like we have to communicate through it. So I think that's a huge element. Last thing I want to ask you before we flip sides of the ball, and obviously if you have any questions back, fire away. But like, how have they handled quarterbacks who scramble / mobile quarterbacks? Because Jaden is arguably outside of like he and Lamar are in a class on their own. They are 850-yard rushing quarterbacks. Their slipperiness, the way that they get out of the pocket, like they are just different. How have they handled mobile quarterbacks in general, and especially those that have a quarterback run element to them?
These are the things that keep people like me up at night. The Lions have, over the last couple of years, the last several years, really struggled. I mean, it has been a challenge. This year, though, they have been better. I think, I don't want to call them undisciplined in the past, but in that specific sense of staying home and staying alert, they feel more disciplined this season. But that is going to be an issue. And the thing is, they've not seen a ton of them. And I'm not saying there are a ton of guys like Jaden Daniels, but I mean, look at Josh Allen. He made things very, very difficult on the Detroit Lions. And he had a day of days, but part of that was because of what he can do with his legs. So I do think that is a concern for the Lions. I think they see a ton, and something they certainly have, right? It's not something you can simulate. How do you simulate Jaden Daniels in practice, especially when Goff is your quarterback?
Yeah, good luck. You have to put like your fastest guy back there and pretend that every throw that he makes that is terrible actually was complete. Right. Be like, sorry guys. Yeah. You have to know that that's a completion in the game. But you mentioned like some of those 3rd and 6, 3rd and medium type of situations. Like
if you're going to play man coverage against Jaden Daniels without a spy, without anything, like that's a tough ask, because if you cover everybody, he's going to take off. Your eyes are not on the quarterback. So a lot of teams wind up playing zone, or last week Tampa used spy, or I should say a spy, or sometimes they had 2 guys spying him, which was hilarious to watch. And that means you're short on the coverage, or you're short on the actual pass rush. Like, why is Tampa rushing 3? They're the blitz happiest team in the league. Oh, because they have 2 spies sitting in the middle of the field on Jaden Daniels, covering no one, just making sure he doesn't run. And he's a good enough passer that that's not really a viable strategy either. And in some ways, like, this is why it's such a quarterback-driven sport. And again, we're going to talk about the Detroit offense here in a second. And I have more concerns about Washington's ability to stop Detroit's offense than I do Detroit figuring something out. But there is only, for a guy like Daniels who is good at everything, there's only so much you can do. You kind of have to hope he has a mediocre or bad day. And he hasn't had a lot of bad days. So now what that ultimately means in the red zone, and can you at least make that into field goals versus touchdowns? Like, there's, can you limit the explosive plays? Like, if I'm Aaron Glenn this week, that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, is like, hey, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to be us. But like, Joseph, Branch, like, if you're deep, like, you better stay deep, and you better fade 17 side of it. Like, you better be over on McLaurin's side, because they're going to take their shots. Like, Kirby Joseph, go get you a pick. Just bait him into it, make him think he's all alone, like, then get over the top and go catch it. Like, those are the kinds of things that you're going to have to do to stop this Washington offense, just because that's what you have to do to stop this Washington offense that's been one of the best this year, although not the best, because that's the Detroit side of it.
We talked about the defense for Washington and how they stopped that juggernaut Detroit offense to close out the show. And, of course, Logan and I will still do our full preview show. We'll tape that tomorrow, get it out to you middle of the day, early afternoon, as soon as we are done recording it, and our producer is able to cut it up and put it in the feed and do all the things that we have to do on the production side. So look for that tomorrow. Plenty of previews still to come here on the Hoffman Show, including what went down today in Ashburn. Apparently, they got a second locker room session today in Ashburn. So we're having to play Shuffle the Deck here. So the good news is we can take your calls. I was trying to find a place to do that today, and we had a bunch of stuff going on. And then Sam 48 texted me about 5 minutes ago and said, hey, they're reopening the locker room at 5 o'clock, so I can still join you as soon as the locker room is done, but I gotta shift things around. So up next, your calls on this game, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I'd love to get this. What's one thing you feel good about going into Saturday night? What's one thing that scares the daylights out of you? If you only got one of either of those, that's fine. But a thing that you feel good about for the Commanders against the Lions, and one thing that scares you. 301-230-0980. Your phone calls next.
It's time.
it's the Hoffman Show, hour number 2 here on the Team 980. Typically not my beat time, but Sam Fortier had to go back to his day job of actually reporting the things that he'll write in the newspaper and hopefully tell us when he joins us. So we have room to take calls, and apparently we should be taking calls at 5 o'clock more often. Because for all of our struggle to get people to call in yesterday at the usual time that we take a bunch of calls on a Tuesday, holy cow, we have the fullest phone lines we've had in a while as you guys are ready to talk about this Commanders and Lions showdown on Saturday. We asked, what's one thing you feel good about? What's one thing that scares you about this matchup Saturday night? Let's get things started with John in Falls Church. John, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, how's it going?
Going well.
So I think a great opportunity, but it's also the other side of the coin, is if the Commanders jump out to some sort of lead or a couple of good things happen for them, turnovers, long drives, and a 3-and-out or something like that, there's that opportunity where the crowd could get tense and the team could get tense. And it could suddenly be, instead of a positive to be playing at home as a favorite, suddenly turn into a situation where they're trying too hard to win the game and they're just not used to that.
I think that's definitely possible. I mean, I think Detroit's pretty battle-tested. I think they're pretty mentally tough, and I think they have a high level of belief. But I do think that, that tension in the building, and, I would think about, John, thanks for the call, I would think about what would happen if we were in Landover and the same situation was on its head, and you have a bunch of people just going oh, God, here we go again. At this point, I don't know if that exists with this team because of just how ridiculous they've been in these games where there's a faith that Jaden will find a way. In 5, we trust. But considering the sordid and maybe not sordid, it's not the right word, the twisted, just heartbreaking history of the Detroit Lions, I could see that potentially being the case where there's a weird feeling in the building, and then how do they respond to that? But I would trust guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown to go say, well, F it, I'm going to go make a play. So I think that's definitely something to watch. All right, let's go to Mark in Largo. Mark, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show. Something you feel good about and or something that scares you about Saturday night?
I'm gonna be honest with you, Craig. I think what I feel good about is I feel good about this game, and what scares me is the disrespect of Detroit that I'm getting from the Detroit media towards the Commanders. And I will say this, and I said this on Russell's show yesterday. This is a huge game for ownership and management to stick it to Ben Johnson. He's been mysteriously quiet this week so far. Very quiet. And
hold on, Mark. Before we go too far down a rabbit hole here, what Detroit media have you seen that's been disrespectful towards the Commanders?
Well, go to YouTube, bruh. Craig, if you go to YouTube, everything from Detroit. I do a preview of every opponent that the Commanders play and what they talk about. Tampa Bay was nervous. Okay. Philadelphia was nervous.
Okay, who are these fans on YouTube, or are these actual media people who have something more
YouTube,
all due
YouTube,
respect, more than a YouTube channel? I love YouTube. I'm on there too, but it's
true.
one thing to say
you got a point. That could be true.
Are these people that are going to the facility and covering the team, or are these glorified fans? And the other thing about Ben Johnson that I'll say, hold on. Here's the thing about Ben Johnson.
Right.
Ben Johnson gets to give one press conference a week, just like Cliff Kingsbury does. There is no being quiet if you're a coordinator. He does his job. He shows up. He's going to answer questions at the one press conference he gets, and then he's going to continue doing his thing. The coordinators don't talk.
Craig, are you going to let me talk?
Yeah, now I am, but I'm just laying the table stakes here on a more accurate representation.
I understand. I get it, Craig. I get it. But what I'm trying to say to you is this. Okay, this is what I told your screen caller. Jared Goff is not the most mobile quarterback out there. Todd Bowles gave everybody a blueprint on how to play Detroit Lions the second week of the season. And I think we all know Todd Bowles blitzes like crazy. If I was going against them, and this is going to sound crazy, but I would do it. And you get a lead, which I think Washington will get a lead. That I know for sure. Because Detroit has the worst defense in the playoffs, period. They have the worst defense in the playoffs. So they will get a lead. I would start blitzing Jared Goff until the cows come home. And the reason why I say that is because, yes, I know I get it. They got great players on the outside, and they got a great running back. But you know what? They got a quarterback that can't move. And this day and age, if you don't have a quarterback that can move and you're playing against a physical defense and they start hitting you, eventually he'll start throwing interceptions. And that's all I'm trying to say. Craig, I love your show, bro. I love you because it seems like every time we talk, we're always arguing. And I actually like you.
Well, let me.
I do.
I appreciate that,
Right.
and like I'm always open to like fun back and forths. Here would be my thing for
Right.
what you said, Mark. If your grand plan is something that hasn't worked since week 2, we might need to go back to the drawing board because I have no doubt. Like, yes, getting after Jared Goff is, I think, a smart play, and I think that unlike last week
the
where
only
Baker.
play.
Well, that might be true too, but there's a reason it hasn't worked since week 2. And like that, I think, is also relevant. And I do think that there are Commanders fans that hate Ben Johnson because of how last offseason went down and thus are underrating just how good he is. And I think that Ben Johnson knows that Jared Goff is not very mobile, and they won 15 games anyway and had a 33-point per game offense, the best in the NFL. So they have plans for that stuff. Now, if you can find a way to disrupt those plans, great. And that is ultimately Joe Witt's job. I'm just not blind to the gargantuan level of the task.
You might be right. You might be right on that. I still think they could win. But I'm gonna tell you something. I don't know how. I don't know. Craig, you're in your 30s, right? You're in your 30s.
I am.
Okay. So you don't remember the Commanders winning this? I mean, when they went to the playoffs in '86 and '87. You don't remember that?
I was not alive. I was not alive. That's how that math is going to math out.
I got you on that. So, the reason why I say that is because it just reminds me a little bit of, I mean, everybody crapping on the Commanders and saying we don't have a chance. Look, this team won 13 games. Yes, I know they won 15 games. I get it. But 15-13 is not really that far. And I would say that is I think people need to stop sleeping on that.
I guess, Mark, here's the only thing. I got to run because we got full phone lines and we're also up against the break here. Mark, I appreciate your calls always. I think they're always fun. It's fun to banter back and forth. I appreciate Mark and anybody else who has a chip on their shoulder. I'm just going to tell you, I don't think anybody worth listening to is doubting this team. The one entity that I will give credence to that I have heard doubt this team is Vegas. There's no way they should be a 10-point dog. What scares me, Vegas has them as a 10-point dog. Now, they are fully capable of overcoming that. They have at other points this year. And double-digit favorites went down this year at a rate that was kind of unprecedented. We saw a ton of double-digit favorites lose. And I don't think that this is one of those situations. Like, I think these teams are closer to evenly matched. But, like, 13-1, it was 12 in the regular season. And the Lions didn't play last week. 2, 3 games worth of NFL football is like winning 10 or 12 extra NBA games over the course of 17 versus 82. So, like, it is a pretty significant difference. And again, I think a lot of people look at Washington and go, that team scares the bejesus out of me. I don't want to play them. And the reason is simple. They have the best quarterback in the conference. But the worst defense in Detroit, I don't know that I buy that. I don't know that they're the worst defense on the field Sunday. They've had a bunch of injuries, but they've still performed at a high level. Like, I know our last taste in our mouth of the Minnesota Vikings is they stink because they got worked by the Rams. But the Minnesota was phenomenal this year, and they wrecked them in Week 18. Sure, there's a couple teams that got Buffalo, but there are a couple teams that got Detroit, but there weren't a lot of them. And the ones that did were really good. And it didn't matter in a lot of those games because Detroit's offense was that spectacular. So, again, maybe I'm the hater here. And I think Washington can absolutely win this game. And I think this is going to be really fun on Saturday night. I'm just not blind to how good Detroit is. And I will not hand them their respect, especially as someone who kind of believed in what Dan Campbell and them were doing from go and sees a lot of the same things in what Washington is doing. So if you want to believe in Detroit, in some ways it's a belief in what Washington is building here because a lot of the same principles apply, even if some of the roster building and some of the details are a little bit different. All right, more of your calls. We'll try to get through them quick. Next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and we're taking your calls. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. We're looking for one thing you're confident in and one thing you're scared of. Saturday night as the Commanders take on the Detroit Lions. Let's keep it rolling with Terrell in Baltimore. Terrell, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Oh, what's up, man? Can you hear me all right?
It's a little squirrely, but let's see what happens when you start talking and seeing if it cleans up a little bit.
Oh, man, I don't know if you can hear me, bro.
Yeah, I got
might
you.
have to put me on hold. Oh, there we go. Great. I'm glad you went to break after your last call. I needed a smoke break after him. But anyway, the thing that I am happy about, the thing that I'm excited about is like looking at this team last week, being our best defense, being the sustained drives on offense, taking away time of possession against Tampa. I think we can pull the same thing off against Detroit. Specifically, though, and this is where I might ruffle your feathers, if our active running backs are Eccles, Gonzalez, and McNichols. That's all I'm going to say. I think they would be more advantageous in the running back game to make sure that is viable. I'm a little over B-Rob right now, but that's neither here nor there. The things that really scare me, though, is this looming injury to Wagner's ankle, and if our O-line can sustain their rush. And then last but not least, I don't know Minnesota coming out of a game with Detroit. Every team that plays Detroit seems to come out like bruised, battered, and just not the same. And win or lose, whether we're going into the off season and taking this into next year, I don't want this to
we're losing Terrell here at the end of the call. Terrell, great call until your phone crapped out at the end, but I appreciate you, man. Thanks for calling. Obviously he meant Rodriguez and not Gonzalez. I vehemently disagree with Zane Gonzalez running the football. He can kick. But no, Chris Rodriguez over Brian Robinson is an interesting call. And I struggle with this because B-Rob is running mostly pretty hard. I think there's some times as games go on that he's just not confident in what he's seeing because why would he be? Because he's running into dirty looks a lot. Like he just is. He's getting really, really poor opportunities. But at the same time, like his rush yards over expected numbers aren't very good. And there's just a lot of nothing about it says like, hey, this is going great. That's just like, could someone else do better? Are they going to have the same bad looks and get the same bad results? Or maybe some of these looks a little better if a different running back hit the timing a little bit different. And I'm willing to take that risk at this point in the playoffs. It's the playoffs. The question is, can you keep all of them up, or do you just bench B-Rob outright and be like, sorry, dude, you're down this week. Like, we're going with Chris Rodriguez. That's a big thing to do in a playoff game. It's a big thing to do to change your starting running back because it's not just the runs. It's the pass pro. It's catching the ball out of the backfield. It's a lot of stuff. And, you know, B-Rob has earned the right to be the starter throughout most of his performance of the year. But, yeah, he's cold right now. I don't think there's any way around it. And so I don't know what to do with that piece of information. It's a tough call. That's why Dan Quinn's paid a lot of money. Let's go to Tom in McLean. Tom, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
All right. First of all, I'm a first-time caller and love your show.
Thanks, Tom.
Yes, I've been a Washington Redskins fan since 1974. I've gone through, seen all the 4 Super Bowls. As you know, we won 3 of them. This is what I say why we're so positive about this game coming up against Lions. We have JD5, probably the greatest draft pick in Washington football history. I'm going to say it right now. I lay it out now. The guy is humble. He's blessed. He's just got all the intangibles. And I truly think he's better than Jared Goff. And this is why we're going to win this game this coming Saturday. I'm super stoked. I can't wait to see this game. And I just think for some God bless reason, I think we're going to win.
Tom, I get it. I get it, man. It's very simple. Thanks for the call, and especially as a first-time caller. Like, you got the better quarterback, you got a shot. No one's going into the game being like, we got the better quarterback, but we got no chance today. Like, that's not how football works. Now, we have seen teams with great quarterbacks get beat by better rosters, and Jared Goff might be the second-best quarterback in the NFC. Let's not forget who Jared Goff is, by the way. This dude was a number 1 overall pick. And Well, there was certainly some debate in that draft about, like, is he just going one because he's the best in a bad quarterback class? It was him. It was Carson Wentz. Should Wentz have been the number one guy? Like, he's North Dakota State. Obviously, that hasn't gone too great for a couple of good years in Philly, including a horrendous stop here. Like, there's just a lot of stuff around Goff because of what happened in LA, and he got traded, and obviously they've only been so good in Detroit. They haven't gotten to this point, or they got to this point last year and lost. So what happens? Actually, sorry, they got to the NFC Championship game and lost. So, like, can he lead this Detroit team? But, like, Goff is freaking talented as a thrower. I remember watching him his rookie. No, it would have been his second year in LA. Sean's first year when I was on the beat and they were playing at the Coliseum and going out there. And I remember watching Goff warm up, and I just went, I get it. I get why this guy was number one pick. The ball flies off his hands. And when he gets hot, he's had multiple first halves this year where he doesn't register an incompletion. Like, when he gets hot, that offense can go. But he also has cold streaks. He is very streaky. He doesn't have a mobile element like Jaden does. So even if he's the second best quarterback in the NFC, like, he's definitively behind the first guy at this point. And that first guy is Jaden Daniels. And that gives you a shot, because if Washington can just be good enough to get to third and manageable, Jaden can make stuff happen on third downs with his legs and keep the game alive. And, can he hit a couple of shots down the field? And next thing you know, you got a ball game late, and we all seem to know what happens when there's a ball game late involving these Washington Commanders. Let's wrap things up with Carlos. Carlos, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey. Yes, how you doing? So, what I did, I'm calling back because early in the season, I called in. This is my second time calling. And what I said, what your question was then, I'm going to have to change the topic. Sorry about that. Because you had the question, are the Commanders contenders? I called in. I said, no, they're contending. It was early in the season, maybe 6 games in the season. And I said, they're contending. Yes, that question is answered now. Contenders for the postseason. They're in the postseason. They are contenders for the damn Super Bowl. You got to get past the Rams, Philly, or Detroit. One of those three teams could be the one after this game with Detroit. I believe we can win, like a lot of us who believe. Either Philly or the Rams will be the next. Yes, they're contending. Yes, Jaden is the better quarterback. I just had a conversation with my wife. Out of the scale of Goff and the other quarterbacks, Jaden tips the scales in favor of being the better quarterback. Washington has a great chance of doing this. I go back to that early part of the season again because I was in a store buying some beer, and this Philly fan was there, and he commented about, oh, this is not going to happen because you're the Redskins / Commanders. I'm saying from the beginning, this is a whole new team. Stop thinking about, and this is what I said on that call, stop thinking about this team in that light, because this is a whole new team. Forget about that team. Erase that memory because this team is a whole new team. It's almost like if you could call that you can't call it an
expansion franchise.
Yeah. No, it's not a new franchise, but it's a new team.
Totally. Carlos, appreciate the call, man. Thanks for checking back in and eating a little crow and having a little fun with it, because the best part about being wrong in this case is your team's awesome. And I appreciate you calling back in. So, look, man, this is what it's all about. It's getting to games like this. There are 8 teams left in the NFL. And the team that you root for, if you're listening, very likely, is one of those 8. This is what it's all about. The heartbreak is real if you lose. But by the same token, I think you look at the way this team is built, and if Jaden is who we think he is, then they're going to be back here. There are no guarantees. And that's something that I would be preaching if I was in the building. But I'm not in the building. I'm a radio host doing a radio show. And they should be back here. They should. It's not guaranteed every year. Like Joe Burrow, goes to a Super Bowl in year 2. Hadn't been back since. They missed the playoffs this year. The NFL is hard. It's especially hard when you're good, because only one team gets to win every year. and maintaining, keeping players becomes hard as you win and other teams start poaching your coaches. Like, it's just it's not set up for sustained success. But they have the one thing that tends to sustain success, and that is a top flight quarterback. And they happen to have it, by the way, in a conference where currently there aren't really any other ones, which would seem to be advantageous in the long run. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well in the free Odyssey app. And I do believe Sam Fortier is done in the Commanders' locker room, so he's going to join us with a live report next. It's the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and half hour later than usual, but we're going live to Ashburn, so it is time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story, from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Fresh out of the Commanders' locker room, Sam Fortier joins us. Of course, the Commanders beat reporter for the Washington Post. You can follow him on Instagram and TikTok for some great digital content as well. Sammy, what'd you find in your? Did you guys go a second time into the locker room today? What was that all about?
Yeah, they had a short first availability because of a meeting, and so the second time we went down, we talked to Zach Ertz and Nick Allegretti. And who else? I'm walking out of the facility right now with Benjamin Standing, who is also congested. Ben, am I missing anybody? He said no. I think it was just Zach and Nick.
Okay, well, I mean, those are two good guys to talk to. Allegretti is one of the great guys to talk to in that locker room. And with all due respect to whatever you got from those guys, the thing that people want to know, Sam Fortier, from you, sir, is what the heck is going on with Bobby Wagner's ankle? How serious is this injury, and how nervous are we about not just him being able to play? Like, he's going to play, but at what level can he play on Saturday night?
It's a great question. It's one that we did not anticipate when we talked to Dan Quinn on Tuesday. Bobby has not talked to us in the locker room. He's planning to do it tomorrow. We initially were going to get him in the second locker room open today, but he decided, hey, let's talk tomorrow. Like you said, I don't anticipate him missing this game, but how much does it affect him? I don't know. We don't really get to see them do much more than stretch when we're in there for practice at this point of the season. And so I think it's a fair question to say, hey, with an interior run game that is as good as the Lions is, with the weakness that it's been for the Commanders all season, like, how big of a deal is this? I think it's potentially a big deal.
It's potentially a huge deal. I mean, he is such a big part of what they do against the run, his physicality, not to mention his leadership, and if there's anything clouding his mind of, like, can I make it to my gap because this ankle hurts? Like, does he miss something else? Like, that's just the reality of a human being dealing with pain. In terms of how they deal with this run game, both Montgomery's back, first of all. Like, he missed the end of the season, but he's back for Detroit. Gibbs is both top 6 in the NFL in success rate and EPA per play, so he's always good and often explosive. How do you think they go about corralling it based off what you've been able to gather, asking folks about it, and what you've studied on your own on tape?
Yeah, I think that you have to – I don't know exactly what they do schematically, but you have to be better on the interior. If you look at it, Detroit is, I think, top 3 in EPA success rate and yards per carry in terms of between the tackles, what they're able to do. And so, I mean, you obviously need excellent games from Daron Payne, and John Allen and Johnny Newton. You need all those interior guys to step up. And so I think that it's a huge deal because we've seen Ben Johnson, and Joe Witt talked about this today, they test your discipline. They're going to find the weak point, and they're going to hit it. And, if you look back against, at Detroit's games against poor interior run defenses like Tennessee earlier in the year, I know they got better as time went on, but I think they had 120 yards just between the tackles in that game because Montgomery and Gibbs, Sonic Knuckles, they're really tough to bring down. And I think that Ben Johnson is extremely good at finding your weakness and exploiting it.
Sam Fortier is with us from the Washington Post. If that's not a hard enough day at the office for the Commanders' defense, they also have to deal with Jamison Williams, probably the fastest receiver in the NFL, on the outside, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had 1,500 yards last year on the other. So, and by the way, also Sam Laporta. There's just an endless amount of weapons on this Detroit side. Is the running game the thing that scares you most, or are you more I don't know, the running game is going to be what it's going to be, but if they hit some explosives, that's the thing that buries the Commanders?
Yeah, I think the answer is all of it. Their ability to beat you anyway. They've been in ball control, grinded out physical games, and they've also been in shootouts. They're capable of doing anything. I think Jared Goff, when you watch on tape, he's just so good at managing those things. And, when he drops back and then off play action throws a dig route over the middle, you're he just is very good at managing and kind of being the coach on the field for Ben Johnson. And so for me, I would worry more about the run game just because it's the Commanders' Achilles heel so far this season, and also like the best way to beat the Commanders is keep Jaden off the field and don't let him come onto the field where you're down one score or it's tied at the end of the game. And so I think that is what makes you nervous, because if you think back to the Dallas game, Craig, like they were very successful, 3rd and short, 4th and short, like running it up the middle. That was not a problem, and I don't think the Commanders have shown that they are able to stop it yet.
No, definitely not. And of course, you could say the same in reverse for Washington's offense. The best way to stop the Detroit offense is to keep them off the field. And now we get to the point, Sam, where we acknowledge that you really unlocked the soundbite of the season. When you asked Cliff a couple weeks ago, can you win without running the football? And he was like, I don't want to, but yeah. And then they go out and do it in a playoff game. What did you make of his answer, though, today about why he kept running it even though the run game wasn't working against Tampa, and what that meant to their overall success?
Yeah, I mean, he basically said, because Dan Quinn is a defensive coach, I've learned from him that sometimes you just have to stick with the run game because it's a mentality thing. It keeps them honest, and it's particularly late in the fourth quarter, it burned clock. Like, I think that is a thing that people underestimate the importance of. And so to me, like, what I made of his answer was he knows that he has to be balanced, and that doesn't mean it has to be 50-50 all the time, but it means that you have to test the defense in both ways. And I think, the Lions defense, especially because they're banged up, I think there are going to be opportunities. Well, theoretically, there will be opportunities to run the ball. I don't know if the Commanders can capitalize on that, but I think that you're likelier to get them in the run game than you are in the past game, even though they've allowed some explosives, just because they play so aggressively.
Right. So let's zoom out for a second on that concept before we zoom back into this game, because you're someone who's written about the analytics revolution in football. Like you're very well versed in these things and know a lot of the people around the league who are implementing analytics and this kind of thing. And there's kind of this, I would say, media analytics community, some of which live on a very extreme of like basically you should never run the football because the EPA per play is higher for passing than it is for rushing. And then you have all these coaches that are like, I don't know, my entire life, like teams that run the football well win. And now we've seen that balanced kind of approach work this season. You see someone like Cliff who's like, yeah, in my past, I probably would have just aired it out, but I understand the value of running the football. How is watching this offense this season shaped your perspective on offense when it comes to running the football and the value of it?
I think it depends almost entirely on your quarterback, because we saw Eric Bieniemy last year run a theoretically good offense if you're just looking at, the data in terms of like how aggressive you should be in play calling and passes. And that works with Patrick Mahomes. It does not work with Sam Howell. And guess what? It does work with Jaden Daniels, because over the last 4 full games he's played in, he's had at least 40 dropbacks, at least 10 runs. What he can do as a scrambler, makes up for a lot of things, not only in the run game, but just in play calling for Cliff Kingsbury. And so I believe offensive lineman Mitchell Schwartz on Twitter, I think, is a really good one. He used to play offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's like, look, momentum and the value of running the ball doesn't show up in the data, but I felt it. I felt it on the field, and you can't tell me that's not real. And I totally buy that. And so I think that it just depends. What is the best way for you to win? Because I promise you, Andrew Wiley, Nick Allegretti, Mitchell Schwartz, guys that play with Patrick Mahomes, they don't mind pass blocking 65% of the time if you're going to the Super Bowl. It's just when you do that and you suck, that's a problem.
Right. And then I think there's also the downside limitation of it. And I think that's been the magical thing about, especially last week, to drop back 40 times as a rookie in a playoff game and have no turnovers is an all-time type of performance. And Jaden specifically's lack of turning the football over makes the formula work. Because running the football, yes, you can fumble, but the likelihood of fumbling versus the likelihood of throwing an interception, it's probably less than half, if not even more severe in terms of risk aversion. And so I think the other thing that's an element here is the impact of big explosive plays that are positive. And then even if you want to look at last week, the impact of a turnover, I'm sure it's somewhere dispersed through the data, but it's almost hard to capture how calamitous it can be, especially if it's in the area of the field that Tampa turned it over with Baker missing the jet sweep to McMillan on Sunday night.
There's a meme on Twitter that I don't know if I'll do a good job explaining on the radio, and if I don't, please let me know. But, like, it's like a bell curve of, like, how well you know ball. And it's like the dumbest person and the smartest person are saying, like, oh, like, the good player, like, give the ball to your good players. And then,
it's just like a circle.
Yeah, it's like the smart person, no, like, give the ball to your best player the most amount of times, and, like, Jaden has proven he will not turn the ball over. So, like, giving him 40, we haven't seen 50 yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they did this weekend because of how the Lions play defense, and I want to talk about that more. But, like, if Cliff Kingsbury said, hey, our best chance to win this game, if we can't get the run game going, which we probably won't because we haven't for weeks, is, like, dropping Jaden back 50 times and being like, go win, I'd be like, yeah, that's a totally defensible, if not, like, encouraging strategy.
I don't disagree. Sam Fortier with us here on the Hoffman Show, guiding his own interview right back where I was going to take it anyway. So good work on that. You're doing TikToks, you're doing Instagram Reels, you're doing YouTube Shorts. Next thing you know, you'll be hosting a radio show. Just warning, Sam, it's a lot longer. The radio show's much longer than 60 seconds. I know you can do longer on some of those platforms now, but we're here for 3 hours every day, so you settle down over there. Let's zoom back in on that aspect of it, though. With the Lions defense, they play a ton of man coverage, and there's part of me that's like, fantastic. You're not going to have eyes on Jaden. He's going to run all over the place. Terry McLaurin could have a field day. There's part of me that goes, okay, well, they did a pretty good job on Justin Jefferson a couple weeks ago, and who else for the Commanders is going to be able to beat man-to-man coverage? Where do you kind of fall on that spectrum, or is there another aspect of Detroit's defense that you actually even find more interesting than that?
It's a good question. Basically, when I watch Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for the Lions, I'm like, this dude wants to beat me up. He plays man coverage at the highest rate in the league. He blitzes at the third highest rate in the league. He plays base defense with that third linebacker at the highest rate in the league. His defense is the second most penalized in the league. Like he is super aggressive. And, like, because of that, like, they hit a lot of teams in the mouth. But because they take so many risks, they also get burned. They've allowed the fourth highest rate of explosive plays, particularly in the pass game. And so to me, it's just like, Cliff, I think, had an awesome answer that you should play if you haven't already today, where he was like, Aaron Glenn, like, is good. He's going to get you. He's going to get you for sure. You're going to take a negative play. You're going to have a big negative, but you can't become an emotional play caller. Like, you have to stay within yourself and say, okay, he got me. Maybe he gets this drive, but we can get him in the long term because he's so aggressive. And to me, that's the perfect encapsulation of how you beat this defense. Like, yes, I think the specific matchups are really important. Terry, no matter which corner he goes up against, I think he's going to have chances to win man coverage. We talked to him about that today. But to me, it's about Cliff sticking to his plan because Aaron Glenn is going to get you, but can you get him back?
Right, and we will play that coming up in our Pick 6 at 6 at, 6 o'clock. So, again, Sam just driving the ship in the direction it was already going, so continuing to do a great job on that. But I think that the follow-up, and this is a second layer question, if you will, off of that is, if there are opportunities to take shots with frequency, because that's how they play, do you take them all? Because normally explosives is what you want. Like, you live in the NFL to try to get big explosive plays down the field. The percents are so dramatically shifted if you have a 15-plus play or 15-plus yard pass or a 10-plus yard run on any given drive of scoring a touchdown. But they have to have the clock management part of this game as well. So how do you think Cliff approaches that dial, and how does Jaden approach that aggressiveness dial?
I think you have to take your shots early because they're going to be aggressive, and I know that if those shots don't hit, that could lead Detroit's offense to get ahead. And if they get up 2 scores, I think that's going to be really difficult because of what we talked about, their strength running the ball, the Commanders' inability to stop the run. It could get out of hand in a hurry. But if you're 8.5-point underdogs, I think you have to take your shots to go into a really difficult place to play and pull off an upset against the Super Bowl favorites. And, Craig, to me, that's why the X factor in this game for the Commanders is De'Ami Brown, because the Commanders don't have another deep threat. I know OZ, I know Jamison Crowder, those guys have had moments, But De'Ami Brown is the guy who can win deep, who can beat man-to-man coverage, stack guys, and make plays down the field. He's just done it really inconsistently throughout his entire career. He had, I think, one of the best games of his career last week. And my question is, can he sustain it? Because he has a huge opportunity to change this game because the Detroit Lions are going to try to take away Terry. But if he can step up and make them focus on him, that changes the Commanders' entire offense, in my opinion.
No, that's been true since the moment Noah Brown went out. Like, with the one game they didn't have De'Ami was probably their worst offensive performance since Noah went out, because it was literally just Terry or nothing, because you can cover all those other guys underneath. Like, Jameson's a good zone player or even a good man beater on like quick slants, quick outs, anything that happens now. But he's a 4-6 guy. Corners are going to catch up. OZ, same kind of player, more of a quickness power player, not someone with long speed. And De'Ami has that. So I think the other part about what you just said, Sam, that kind of goes to something you said earlier is, what's the fear if you are down in a game? It's that, we're going to have to drop our quarterback back all of a sudden and throw it 50 times. You just said 3 minutes ago that might be the strategy anyway. So the idea of taking risk early to fall into the same game plan you might have anyway, my question on that would be, like, would Dan Quinn, the defensive head coach, go for that? Or is he like, no, that's not how we're going to do things? Because I think for Cliff, there's probably a part of him that's looking at the tape going, I don't know, could be fun.
I think that Dan Quinn, like his fourth down aggressiveness, is probably going to have to embrace a level of aggression that might have made him feel a little queasy in his first stop in Atlanta, right? Because, like we've talked about, you cannot win running the ball, taking the points, blocking the storylines. I think a perfect example of that is, Craig, you might have remembered this from early December, but the Lions were in a tie game. They were on the Green Bay 21 with about 46 seconds left.
Yep.
And they didn't take a short field goal to take the lead and to give the Packers the ball back. They went for it, which was like, I was watching the game and I was like, this is insane. Like I think every football coach in America would probably say, take the points, get the 3-point lead, and then trust your defense. But Dan Campbell said, no, we're that aggressive. We're going to go for it, run the clock out, then kick the field goal. And it worked. And I asked Dan Quinn about it, whenever we talked to him next, if he saw that, what he thought of it. And he was like, look, man, like, they have a level of aggressiveness that they've committed to, and it worked out for him. It was a good call. And so to me, I think that Dan Quinn understands exactly what he's getting into, and so he's going to have to throttle up.
No, I think the other part of that is something that Quinn has realized over the last month, too, that he might be a defensive head coach, but this is an offensive football team. He can want to be a defensive football team, and maybe over time they become a little bit more balanced. But Dan Campbell plays like his offense is the better unit, and specifically in that game, that was like at the absolute peak of the Lions' injuries, and I think they had even lost some guys on that night, so they were as thin as they could possibly be. They didn't have a chance to bring in replacements yet, and so he's like, my defense isn't my defense. I'm just going to win the game with my offense because they're the best unit maybe in all of football. And so I think Quinn has adopted that. He realizes that he's got the best player on the field in Jaden Daniels, and he's played the last month like he has the best player on the field, and nowhere is that more true than going for it 5 times, including, by the way, twice on the first 2 drives when he didn't get it the first time against Tampa. That was the thing that I was like, here is the Dan Quinn test. Here is how far on the Dan Campbell meter have you gone? And he answered the bell, Sam. He went for it again, even though he missed it the first time.
Craig, I want to share something with you that I'm using in a feature probably on Friday, so just a little sneak peek. But I'm writing a story about Jaden's composure and just how poised he is. Like, that's the word that I feel like people are associating with him so much, right? It's not just the talent. It's that, like, when the field goal goes in, he doesn't even really react. And after they missed that first 4th down, Sam Hartman, the practice squad quarterback who's been training with Jaden since, before the draft in California, and they're close friends, he told me Jaden walked by him on the sideline and winked. That is the level of confidence that we are talking about with Jaden Daniels. And if I saw that as a coach, I'd be like, yeah, run that guy out there and give him the ball as much as you want.
That's awesome. I can't wait to read that story. You all can read it as well when Sam hits that magic publish button on Friday. Well, his editors, but you get the point. On Friday in the Washington Post at washingtonpost.com/sports. Also, make sure you're following along. Just search for Sam 48 on TikTok, on Instagram, all the great digital content he's producing, including updates from the facility each and every day. Sam, always appreciate your time here on the radio, sir. And anytime you want to try filling in for me, let me know since you're already halfway there.
Thanks for having me, Craig. And I don't know what the math is on that, but I think that like a radio show is like
it's a lot of TikToks, bro.
180, a lot of TikToks. I'm not a math guy, so
yeah, no, I'm not either.
I appreciate how hard it is, and I think I'm good for now.
Okay. If you change your mind, you have the direct. You got the bare bones right. We can help you with some of the lengthening out for the. And plus, hey, I don't have to deal with an editor. The words come out of my mouth and bang, there they are, for better or for worse. Safe travels, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That's Sam Fortier with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, he mentioned a couple things that Cliff said that you should hear. We've got those things in our Pick 6 at 6 next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980, and it is time for our Pick 6 at 6.
It's Commander Storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level and build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
Today, a Wednesday that feels like a Thursday because, well, the coordinators talked. I have to keep reminding myself, no, today is actually Wednesday, even though we heard from Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt Jr. You'll hear more from Joe in just a second, but
Number 1.
let's start off with Cliff Kingsbury and the Commanders' offense, which stuck with the run game in a major, major way on Sunday against Tampa. That was despite the fact that it wasn't really working at all. Their longest rush of the day on Sunday was actually a 12-yard pass to Austin Eckler. The pass just happened to be a lateral, and thus it counted as a rush. Yeah, it was that kind of day. But that commitment to the run game is no accident, and it's something that Cliff Kingsbury has learned this year from none other than the head coach that employs it.
Yeah, it's helped me having a defensive head coach. I can tell you that much because he lets it be known we need to run the football at times that I would maybe in my previous life be airing it out. But we're going to do whatever it takes to win, and we have good backs, and we've had a great scheme throughout the year. We've faced some good fronts. I mean, those two guys inside there are as good as anybody we played against all year at Tampa, and the linebackers are tremendous players. So it was a challenge. Todd Bowles is one of the best defensive minds in the league and has been for a long time. So overall, it was a challenge, and we just kept plugging away at it, and Jaden made some plays with his feet that helped us out, but I really, having DQ and just him mentoring me in a way, if you will, just about sticking to the run game, how it affects the defense, seeing it from that perspective has been good for me.
I love how open this staff is to learning from each other. I think they're all going to be better coaches when and if they leave here. And again, I'm not suggesting this merely just for Cliff. I'm not suggesting that Cliff is leaving anytime soon. He might, but I would actually be more surprised if he left than I would if he stays. But I even think of someone like Anthony Lynn, who's been in the NFL for, 30 years at this point, coaching for most of that time. I'm sure he'll be a better coach in his next stop if he has a next stop. I'm sure DQ would just love to keep him around as long as Anthony will stay. But there are guys on this staff that have learned from each other. I'm sure that there are things that Cliff has taught Dan. Dan's actually mentioned at times this year. He'll bounce stuff off of Cliff and really, wind up using his perspective as someone who, while he did not succeed as a head coach, has sat in the chair, did have some success as a head coach. He has something to offer. And so I just appreciate that a lot, that Cliff, a guy born in the air raid, played for it, coached it, is like, this defensive head coach might have a point here on some of this running the ball stuff in terms of managing the game writ large. And obviously it worked to perfection on Sunday.
Number 2.
Now, they also got tremendous help, not just from Jaden and his feet, but Jaden and his arm and some of the guys that caught balls on Sunday. De'Ami Brown, chief amongst them, absolute breakout game for the Commanders' number 2 wide receiver. What did Cliff see from number 2?
Yeah, they've all stepped up when the number's been called. And De'Ami is a guy who, when we got here, I had known about him from North Carolina. We obviously looked at him when I was at Arizona, and just the attitude and the approach really has gotten more businesslike and more professional throughout this season, and it's paying off. I mean, he's showing up over and over and over. Always been able to run, always been able to be really good with the ball in his hands, but his route technique and fundamental things like that are really improving, and it's a credit to him and the way he's approached this season. And so to have a game like that in that type of environment was really cool to see that hard work paying off.
I love that little tidbit from Cliff, that De'Ami's professionalism, approach, all that stuff has gotten better, because De'Ami's always been a guy, as far as I know, that's worked pretty hard. Like, I don't think work ethic was ever a huge issue with De'Ami. But just because you're willing to work hard doesn't mean that you're working smart or that you're doing the things that you need to do. Like, you can go work really hard in the weight room on something that's like, I'm going to go do a bunch of bicep curls and like, I'll have sick biceps and I can flex on people and I worked really hard, but does that make you a better football player? Like, no. I'm not saying that was a specific example to De'Ami. I have no idea what De'Ami was doing in the weight room beyond the stuff that he put on YouTube. But, like, clearly, I think he's learned better habits as this season has gone on. He's applied them, and the results have kind of speaking for themselves. He's continued to just get better and better as this year has gone on, and I have no doubt that they will try to bring him back next year. Do they want him as their number 2 receiver? Probably not. I think they'd love to upgrade there. But if Diami's a 3/4, like kind of your first backup outside wide receiver, like that is a really, really valuable piece that you can give 40, 50 snaps a game to. Someone that you can trust if one of your number 1 guys goes down to fill that role. And that has been huge for them as he's stepped up since Noah Brown went down. Of course, there with that really scary injury that we found out about later in the Tennessee game that we learned about after the bye. Of course, that was not all to the passing game on Sunday and the explosive passing game specifically. They had a huge chunk on that first drive to Terry McLaurin. I think it was actually their longest play of the game, certainly their longest air yards play of the game, a 35-yarder. And I think that's something that we need to watch for on Sunday, too, taking some shots early. What are the advantages to doing or to throwing the ball deep early in a game? Here's Cliff.
More so, I think, getting Terry the ball. He's a guy, you see the sideline erupts, like he gets going. I just got to continue to find ways to get him touches early. But that was a tremendous throw and catch, and definitely gave us some confidence. But when he's involved early, we've been a lot better on offense.
100% agree. And I actually agree, not just with, hey, deep shots are great, but like get Terry the ball early. There's an energy to the game and kind of a heightened sense of the defense of like, oh, crap, he's going to have one of those days that opens stuff up for other people as well. If you're a D coordinator, you have to pay attention. If he can just slink off to the side and not really be a factor, like that's not ever going to work for this offense. He is their best player, not named Jaden Daniels, and they have got to get him the ball. Of course, part of that is on Cliff. Part of that is on, well, Jaden Daniels, who has continued to just read the field at a really high level, which has been noticed by his OC.
That was something that I thought jumped dramatically from his junior to senior year at LSU. And that was the thing that blew me away the most was his progression in the pocket. I thought junior year it was okay, but he'd get out and use his legs a lot more. And that second year he was progressing through, getting to the third, fourth, finding his check down. And that's something that's just, he uses the virtual reality stuff constantly. And I think that really has helped him just hang in that pocket and nail those reads and go through it like he does. But that's for a young guy to stand in there and do what he does and get to those reads has been as good as I've ever seen from a young player.
And the improvement, like he started off doing it better than I think we thought he would coming out of LSU. He improved that much in the spring through his pre-draft process, and then obviously when he got in camp, by the time week 1, like he's still running around a lot week 1, but by like week 2, week 3, you're like, what is this? This is way better than it was in college. And as Cliff said, senior year was way better than junior year. And now he has one of his toughest tests yet because the Detroit Lions are waiting.
Number 3.
And they are aggressive. Man coverage, a lot of blitzing, and they have a really good front. We'll get to the front in a second, but here is Cliff Kingsbury on Aaron Glenn, who might very well be a head coach here in about a month, and what he is doing with this Lions defense.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get you. You got to just stay within yourself. I think sometimes you can become an emotional play caller, if you will, and like, oh, God, we got to make this up. And you just know, hey, with his scheme, there's going to be times that they win and they get you and you're going to have some negative plays, but you're going to have a chance because they take risks to hit some big ones as well. And I think just staying in your pocket and not trying to force stuff, not getting out of your comfort zone and your rhythm because, they've hit you on a few things. But he's done a tremendous job with that group, like I said. To have the injuries they've had and still play the level they're playing at right now has been really impressive.
And their front is probably the most banged up part of their defense, so especially now that Alex Anzalone's back at the linebacker level. They've lost some guys there. Anzalone returned, but Aiden Hutchinson, McNeil, like their defensive front has been decimated. They brought in Zadarius Smith, which helped a lot. But that front has actually played really well despite Hutchinson not being there. Last but not least from Kingsbury, what has he seen out of the Detroit front?
Yeah, they've done a tremendous job. I've been really impressed. I know some of the numbers don't look as good as they may want, but when you consider the injuries and the things that have happened to them, it's pretty amazing what they've done. And I thought their best performance was, the last time they were out against Minnesota, they were dominant. Whoever they put in plays hard, they're disciplined, and they make you earn every inch. And so that's a credit to Aaron and Dan and the culture they have going there.
I think some of the teams that the Commanders blew out earlier this season, in part, they blew them out because they just flat out played harder. You're not going to play harder than Detroit. You can play as hard as them, and the Commanders will. This game is going to be physical and violent. But the question is, can you ultimately, whether it's through scheme, whether it's through execution, come out on top? Because the physicality advantage is probably going to wind up being a wash. Speaking of big fellas up front, Vince Wilfork joins the show. Coming up at 6:30, two-time Super Bowl champ talks about building a winning culture and more. But coming up next, we will hear from Joe Witt Jr. But first, let's get an update on the latest in the world of women's sports, presented by Wawa Chicken. How you wanna at Wawa with customizable crispy or roasted chicken sandwiches. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. You heard from Cliff Kingsbury. Let's keep the Pick 6 at 6 rolling and let you hear from Joe Witt Jr., the Commanders' defensive coordinator, holding court today ahead of the game against the Lions. But that's not the only thing that's going on in Joe Witt Jr.'s world.
Number 4.
Some big picture stuff for Witt to get started. Most specifically, what has he learned this year? Because this has been his first year as a defensive coordinator. There's a lot of reflecting that goes on as you get through the holidays and then you get to the playoffs, and it's like, wow, we're here. And certainly Joe's been reflecting all along, even though he wouldn't probably categorize it as reflecting. Like, he's self-scouting, he's self-studying, he's learning things about himself as a coordinator and as a play caller. So he was asked about how this evolution has been in year one.
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it. As a coach, probably the big picture, thing of it, of not necessarily looking so much at the back end, but looking at the whole picture, the big picture element. And when I say big picture, the complementary aspect of it, okay? How does the offense affect us? How does the special teams affect us defensively? And so I think that's, from big picture, from a play calling standpoint, early on in the season, I was trying to call plays perfectly, okay? In this situation, you're supposed to do this. In this situation, and after the third game, going into the Arizona game, I said, the hell with that, okay? I'm going to call it the way I want to call it, and we started playing a hell of a lot better, okay? And so, and that's the way I should have cut it loose at the beginning. But I was, all right, it's 2nd and 7+, all right? They're here. This is the perfect, supposed to be the perfect call here. No, just cut it loose, and that's what we've been doing ever since, and that's what I'm going to do.
I love that reflection from Joe, and I love that honesty from Joe. You gotta feel it out. Hey, I know, because the thing is, if you do the work to prepare, which he and every coach in the NFL does, but I especially think that he does, then your gut is going to probably lead you the right place because you're prepared. You don't have to then go back and reference the notes and be like, you're sitting there with the pen on the sideline being like, which call do I pop up here? You got to feel for the game because based off your preparation, what you're going to need in that moment. And then that feel gets better and better and better and better over time as you get to know your team and you have more experience doing it. And then someone else calls and is like, hey, would you like to be a head coach? Jets are interested in Joe Witt Jr. as at least head coach interview. Joe, thoughts on that?
Joe, just want to get this one out of the way first. Your name has come up with in connection to the Jets job as a request of permission. Did you interview, and how nice is it for you to be in that position where your name is mentioned after the 1 year as a DC? I'm going
to be honest with you, I'm not going to try to dodge a question, but my whole focus is on Detroit. If I put any effort and energy into anything else, with this opportunity we have, I'll be cheating these men. So that's the only thing I'm concerned with right now. Yeah.
It's not nice. He doesn't want it. Joe, I cannot stress this enough. Don't even interview. The Jets that's not even like interviewing for an NFL job. It's interviewing for the circus. You're doing the right thing. Stay focused, not just because it's best for the Commanders, and I would love to see them win / see you win. You don't want that job. Don't worry about it.
Number 5.
As for the men that he has now, they're getting ready to prepare or to play one hell of a group of men up in Detroit. And his matchup this week is one of the absolute hardest in football. He is going toe-to-toe with Ben Johnson, who has been the best offensive coordinator in football, arguably, over the last 2 years. I know people here have mixed feelings about him because of the head coaching search last year, but there's no denying this guy's brilliance as a head coach as he coordinated a Detroit offense that averaged 33 points a game this season. So why is Johnson so good? Here's Witt.
They test your discipline. I think Ben does a really nice job of understanding coverages. He understands horizontal spacing as well as vertical spacing. He understands the responsibility of every player, and he's going to test the discipline of those players and of the coverage. And so you have to be where you're supposed to be and let your eyes be true. And if you don't, he's going to take advantage of it. So that's what makes them. And then they have really good players. They have 9 and 26 have real speed, okay? And so they're going to try to get matchups. They're going to try to do those things. And then you have, 14, he's just a great receiver, inside, outside, can do it all. So they're a good football team.
They're good all around, and they have a guy who triggers the offense that is probably still underrated. Jared Goff was a number 1 overall pick. He is supremely talented. Is he the best quarterback on the field Sunday? No. No, he's not. Jaden Daniels is better. I'd rather have Jaden, even at this point in their careers. But don't get it twisted. There are days where Jared Goff is like the best quarterback in the NFL. His hot streaks are white hot, and he is very good at exactly what they ask him to do. Joe asked about Goff and what makes him just so dangerous.
Well, like I said, I think what makes him effective is the understanding from the play caller, from Ben, of how to test people's discipline. You know, Goff is a talented man. He can throw from the pocket. He can throw deep inside and outside. He has all the tools, but their scheme and their eligibles makes them very difficult. And then he's a smart player.
Smart, laser rocket arm. No, hey, Ben's going to create this open guy. I just have to get the ball there. Sick. And he does a really good job of it. Of course, there's the other part of Detroit's offense, too. They will absolutely mash you in the run game and especially inside, an area where Washington has struggled. They have some lighter personnel in there. So how do you deal with all that?
Well, they know how to move people, you know, and they do a nice job of, they can gap scheme, they can do the mid bounce, they have different types of runs that they can run inside, and they just lean on you. You know, they'll go 30+ runs on multiple games where they're just going to lean on you, and then they make you soft, because as soon as you start overplaying that, here comes the leak play, here comes this play, here comes the screen. So you just have to play discipline ball all the way through.
Hey, good afternoon, Coach.
How you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
Great.
Great. Wonderful. I got to deal with that. Man, it's so tough because it feels like Johnson's just waiting for his shot. It's just body blow, body blow, body blow, body blow. Oh, you drop your hands, bang, waylay, right to the jaw. And here it is from a tight end leak where it looks like it's a play action. Oh, that tight end's just coming across, I'm trying to find a linebacker, whoop, run past the linebackers, and you're up the field. And Goff, because he has the arm strength to do this, can throw from outside the right hash back up the left numbers. Like, those throws aren't on the table for every quarterback in the NFL. They are on the table for Jared Goff. And so because they can attack all over, you know, Goff, that quick release and the strong arm, helpful in the screen game. They can get the ball out to their receivers quickly. And then guys like Penei Sewell can not just move people, but they can run to people and then move people. He is the best right tackle in the game. He might be the best offensive lineman in the game, and they use him as such. He is a weapon for them offensively, not just in the trick play category. So it is a tall task for Joe Witt this week. Is that me saying that the Commanders can't do it? No. If you're Joe Witt, are you scared? No. You're a competitor. You love moments like this. You love to see if you can rise to the challenge. But I, sitting in this chair, at this microphone, with the dose of reality, being an independent analyst of the situation, I understand just how gargantuan this task is for Washington because, I mean, even if you do nothing else other than look at the points per game rankings in the NFL, they averaged 33 a game, and they've had a week off to prepare. It's going to be a tall task for this defense on Sunday. Be very, very helpful if they could get a better version of Marshawn Lattimore.
Number 6.
And that is where we close our pick 6 at 6. Joe was asked about Marshawn Lattimore and kind of what happened on Sunday with him and Mike Evans and the bad day that Marshawn had at the office.
I felt that it might be a little bit difficult for the standpoint that, you know, he got one real day of fast practice, and we asked him to go out there, and same thing we asked him last time, to go out against AJ and go out there against Mike. But, you know, that comes with the territory of being who he is, okay? And, you know, when you go out there and you fight on the outside lanes, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. And I have full confidence that he's going to win because he's getting the reps now every day, and he's going to knock all that rust off. So it wasn't the performance that any of us wanted, all right? But I have full confidence in the young man that he's going to get it done.
To me, Marshawn Lattimore looked rusty. He looked like a guy whose timing was off, who didn't quite trust his technique because it felt a little foreign to him. A week's worth of reps will go a long way in fixing that, and a good Marshawn Lattimore performance will go a long way to a Commanders victory on Sunday. That's our pick 6 at 6 here on the Hoffman Show. Tomorrow you'll hear more from Dan Quinn as we close out the week, although tomorrow's only Thursday because the game's on Saturday and everything's moved up today, and that leaves me very confused with our weekly schedule. But it did leave some time for some extra fun things, like a conversation with two-time Super Bowl champion Vince Wilfork. Vince, next on The Hoffman Show. Every once in a while, you get a PR pitch in your inbox that makes you go, hell yeah, I want to talk about food and football with Vince Wilfork. And so the two-time Super Bowl champion is with us now to celebrate game day foodies and help tackle occasional heartburn so fans can get back to their beloved bites. And he's with us on behalf of Tums, who has teamed up with DraftKings to launch the Tums Fantasy Foodball Pool. The free-to-play online game is the first of its kind, offering a free shot at a share of $40,000 in cash prizes beginning during playoff season and ending big game weekend. The campaign will include 4 popularity pools where fans will draft their ideal plate for numerous different food themes. They got spicy food, they got sweet food, they even got tailgate food and New Orleans-based food, of course, because the Super Bowl is down there in New Orleans this year. Vince, appreciate your time, sir. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Hoffman Show.
Thanks for having me. How's everything going?
Hey, man, we're a show that talks about football in Washington, D.C. Things are very, very good right now thanks to the Commanders. And I'm so excited to talk to you about, building a winning culture, which has been kind of the goal of the year. And by accident, they've won 13 games and are headed to the divisional round of the playoffs. So when you think back to those early days for what Bill was trying to build with you guys in New England and some of those early culture building moments, what does it take to get a franchise on the right track and build something that is similar to what Washington has been able to build this year?
Well, first is accountability. Being able to have a group of guys that's not afraid to tell each other what we need to do to accomplish this one goal. And you have to have everybody think on the same mindset of what are we here to accomplish. And my biggest thing will always placing people around the winning culture, what it takes to win. And a lot of times you see a lot of people don't know what it's like to win because a lot of people go to colleges that don't win a lot. So you have to teach them the traits of winning. And the more people that you can get around that can teach winning and have the attitude about winning, and the more leadership you have, I think the more successful you will be. And last but not least, it's the brotherhood. We have to be able to all play together as one. It's not nobody that's, selfish, just worrying about themselves. Football is a team sport. So everybody has to always be on the same page and work towards the same goal. And if something screws up, we all screwed up. It's not just you. We're not going to point fingers. But how can we minimize the mistakes and minimize bad football? And I think a lot of that is locker room driven. The head coach is only there to give you, the plays, but we have to be able to execute it. So the more guys you have in the locker room that can be leaders and can hold each other accountable, because at the end of the day, this is our team, the successful you would be. So that's a winning culture. It starts with the locker room, and it starts with a group of guys believing in each other and putting the team first and being able to execute at a high level altogether.
I mean, it's so funny you use that word brotherhood because that has been the exact term that they've all used this year around that locker room. And I look at a team like Washington compared to, say, a team like Green Bay that just lost. And obviously the Packers had a great season. They're a great team. But they were the youngest roster in the league. And how impactful do you think guys or can you maybe explain to those of us that haven't been in an NFL locker room as players the impact that a guy like Bobby Wagner can have, the choices that Washington made to bring in veteran leadership and not just go full young team like maybe the Packers made that choice to do?
Well, that is huge because you have to understand he's been part of a winning culture, throughout his career. So a lot of guys and a lot of the guys that he plays with watched him play, watch him win Super Bowl, watch him be with a great defense and a great team. So they looked up to him. So automatic there when he's on your team, the first thing you think about is what he's been a part of. So when he speaks, it's coming from experience and it's coming from a place where they executed at a high level and they won. And he can tell them about the brotherhood that they played with. But if anybody sees how, certain teams play, especially Seattle with the Legion of Boom back in those days, you could tell there was a brotherhood. They played together. They had fun playing and it showed. So to have somebody in your locker room and on your roster that's been through that, and these young guys already looked up, they probably was in high school, they probably was in college, understanding who this guy is, and now he's my teammate. It's easy for me to listen to somebody like that. I can remember being drafted by New England Patriots, where when I come there, I remember the Willie McGinnis. You know, I know the Teddy Bruschi, the Rodney Harrison, the Richard Seymour, Taiwan, all these guys, Tom Brady and Corey Dillon. I knew all these guys because I grew up watching. I know these guys. I followed their career, you know, and the leadership, Mike Vrabel, like the leaderships that these guys came with, I already understood what type of player that I wanted to be, just by what type of players that was already there. So having that as a coach, to be able to have a guy like Bobby Wagner, I mean, it speaks volume to that team. And then not only that, you know, the coach that they have, Coach Quinn, I mean, he's been there. He was in Seattle, then he went to, you know, the Cowboys, and then, you know, he had his little one stint as a head coach, didn't work out. He found himself back again and came back, and now he's in Washington. Like, he went down the ranks and he went down this road where he did some self, you know, evaluation of becoming a better head coach and a better person. And now he got a great young quarterback. He got a great young team. They're in Washington, and they're pretty exciting to see. So I love watching them play because you can just see the brotherhood and the excitement and how much in the culture, how much they play for one another. And you can go a long ways being like that.
Vince Wilfork, two-time Super Bowl champ with us here on the Hoffman Show. That young quarterback, pretty good, Jaden Daniels, and not just what he's doing with his arms, with his legs, but he's a part of that brotherhood, the humility he has in that locker room for sure. But what's it like being even a defensive player, knowing that you have a dude like that? Like, you play with the ultimate, that guy will figure it out guy, and Tom. So Jaden, obviously very different stylistically, but there's a belief being in that locker room, Vince, and talking to those guys. Like, if I had $1 for every time I had a guy tell me this year, if we got 5, we got a chance, I'd have a lot more dollars. So what's it like being in a locker room where that quarterback gives you that chance and there's a belief amongst the 53 because of that?
Well, it gives you everything, because if I have faith in my players around me, it allows me to play fast and allows me to play hard. It allows me to do so many different things where I don't have to worry about what I'm going to get out of my teammate. And have a quarterback like that, especially at that position. That's the key is, you know, when you have a leader and they're at that position, and it's easy to play, you know, but it's, you know, when you don't have that leadership quality at that position and they're young, so it's like, okay, well, how are we going to win? We need to figure out ways to help. How can we do this? But to come in the way he came in and just lightening it up, it's a win-win. So it's easy for a young team to look at their leader in their quarterback and basically ride with him. It's like, we have him. We know we have a chance that can hurt him in the air and on the ground. So you get guys wanting to play more and harder for a guy like that, because you still have to understand he's a young quarterback, so he's going to need help at times. But when you have it young, it's a special thing. So I'm very happy with the success that they're having. I'm very happy with the success he's having as a young quarterback. And, you know, it's a lot need to be said from the coaching there, you know, just the development and understanding that draft pick and coming in and being successful right away. It's a beautiful sight to see. So I'm excited for him. I'm excited looking to see how far Washington goes. Regardless of how you slice it, I think this year was a very successful year for them. I think they bring a lot of excitement back to Washington. I think a lot of fans are excited about this team going forward. And that's all you need. You know, in this game, if you have a quarterback at that position and you nail it, you have a chance to win. And I think they nailed it. So now they can look in other places to help him along the way, because that's it. That position is figured out. We don't have to worry about that. Let's put weapons around him. Let's beef up our team and our roster and bring in people that we know can help in other places to get us over to the next level. So I'm excited to see what they're going to be in the future. I can't wait.
Vince Wilfork, the two-time Super Bowl champ, is with us here on the Hoffman Show. As we said, he's with us on behalf of Tums and the Fantasy Foodball Pool. And one of the categories, Vince, in this pool that people can vote on online is tailgate food. And now you get to go tailgate. You're retired. I'm curious, though, you know, that's the fans' pregame food. What was a Vince Wilfork pregame meal back in your playing days?
But pregame, my pregame was Saturday, the day before the game, because game day I didn't really eat. That was just one of those things. I ate. I wanted to be hungry on the field. So, but the night before I ate everything. But my go-to was always wings. I was a wings guy, a wings and burger guy.
Okay.
I really wasn't a big pasta guy or a pizza guy. I was that in high school, but in college and all that stuff, it was burgers and wings the day before, and of course, to top it off was some sweets with like my desserts, cookies and brownies and ice cream towards the end of the night. So I was pretty full for 2 days. So I didn't need to eat on game day. I was pretty locked and loaded the day before a game, ready to go. So that's how I handle my pregame, and that's what I wanted to eat before I got going the night before a game.
Now, in the modern, last 5 years, 10 years especially, every team's got a nutritionist. It's a very different thing. Did you ever have a nutritionist be like, no, man, you got to get some more carbs. You got to do this. You got to do that. And you just basically were like, look, man, it's working for me. I'm on a Hall of Fame track. Leave me alone.
I did. And that's exactly what happened. So probably the last 5 years of my career, a nutritionist came along and said, it's not healthy to do this and that and that. And I'm like, okay, I'll change some things up. But I was still stuck like, listen, this is what I've done my whole life. This is what I've done for my career. This is what I'm going to do. But I wasn't afraid to eat anything if I had to, back into my career. But those nutritionists came and screwed it up. I'll tell you that, man. They wanted to tell you what to do and all that stuff. But it worked for me, A lot of people can't do that. A lot of people can't go that long with basically fasting and before, they can't do that because your body works at a certain level. So everybody, each his own. And I was one of those guys where it never bothered me to be on an empty stomach going into a game. And I don't care if it was a 1 o'clock game or 8 o'clock game. It never bothered me.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it never bothered me.
Interesting. I would have guessed if it was an 8 o'clock game, there'd at least be a breakfast or something.
Mental toughness.
Hey, all sports is just a mix of scheme and psychology, and the psychology is quite important. So tell me more about this fantasy football pool. How do people vote? What's the ultimate end game here? I see a shot at a share of $40,000. So how did folks get in on that?
Right. First, you can go to DraftKings.com/TomsFootball. And it's four themes, right? You have the tailgating that's already finished. Now we're in the spicy. And then after the spicy, we're going to go to sweets. And then we're going to finish it up in New Orleans style cuisine because that's where the Super Bowl is this year. And you basically go in there. So the more points you get, the more you got a shot, right? So I encourage guys, for one, don't forget, because the more you play, the more points you get, so don't forget that. And just have fun with it. It's a thing between, football and food. And the common denominator there is heartburn, right? So that's where Tums come in handy. Because we want to enjoy our food on football Sundays or whenever football play. We want to enjoy our food, but we got to be able to have that Tums right next to us so we can make sure we can continue to have our good time with food and football. So that's why our Tums come up with.
With all the close games the Commanders have played this year, some heartburn perhaps has been
heartburn
part of the play.
Right? So I'm pretty sure they should have a whole box of them.
Last thing, do you have a favorite New Orleans staple? I love going down there. The food down there is so good. It's so amazing. Do you have a favorite etouffee, gumbo, po' boys, favorite spot down there? What's your go-to?
I like all of that stuff, but I'm a boudin guy. But I eat all that. My wife is Louisiana, so I eat all that good stuff. But a lot of people don't understand. They just go down for certain stuff. But all that etouffee, the catfish coubillon, boudin, you name it, gator, you name it. Hey, all that good stuff. But you can't go wrong with New Orleans style cuisine because they are some of the fantastic foodies. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be a fun week for you down there. Enjoy it, man. And Vince, really appreciate the time here on the Hoffman Show.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Thanks again to Vince Wilfork for joining us. Really great chat with him, food, football, and it was kind of funny because we talked about that. Actually, Linnell for some reason is still here. I'm going to bring you in for a second because
you had Vince Wilfork on the show.
Yeah,
That's
we had Vince Wilfork. They reached out, the folks at DraftKings and Tums.
He's got a Tums.
They're doing like they're calling it the fantasy food ball thing. My question for you, Linnell, is did you listen to the show yesterday for Competition Wednesday?
No, Anthony was he in though?
He was here yesterday, which is why we did it yesterday, because today is actually Wednesday.
Wednesday, right.
And even though it kind of worked out because the Commanders' competition day was yesterday, kind of, actually, they probably did it today.
We're adjusting with the
everything's
schedule
weird.
like Washington.
The point is everything's weird. But I recorded with Wilfork in the morning, and he's here on behalf of Tums, and then I had to eat these ridiculously spicy wings during the show as punishment for not picking games correctly.
Okay.
And my guy Tony is working on the full video right now because some of the wing eating happened in commercial breaks. But
Tony Squares.
Yeah. Follow him if you like sports. Let me tell you, if there's a hot sauce that says Ninja Napalm on it, if there's napalm in the name,
I'm about to say
it's gonna be hot.
Yeah.
I was hurting.
That's tough. I hate hot stuff. Seriously.
Okay, that's good to know. Put that on the wheel of mediocre punishment for Linnell in the future. Anyway, whatever the hell you're still doing here, you get to do it because we're done talking in 10 seconds. Studio's all yours. Metal Chris, thank you for your work. I will see everybody tomorrow back here on the Team 980.